And then we can come back to our query builder class. We are now ready to do a little bit of testing, okay, to see how things are before we finish up with the query builder class. So first thing first, there's an exception here that I need to change. So this should be invalid argument. Okay, so invalid argument exception, operator is not valid. All right, so we're pretty much done with the where, pass where, select. So let's implement the first method. Okay, so we're just going to implement only this, and then we can go and really do some tests to see if things are working the way that we expect it to work. So let's come to just really implement that. This is really simple. Return. So we can say return this count. So if we have count, if count is positive, okay, then we want to get the result. Okay, this get, okay, so we get the 0 position of the result. So get is going to return an array, and then we just get the 0 position. Otherwise we just return an empty string, or we can also return null. So remember that our get method returns the entire result set, which is going to be an array of something. It could be array of object or array of arrays. So we just get the one in the first position, okay? And then we're going to come back to program the other methods that we have here. But for now, it looks like we can actually do some tests. So let's come here, and then we're going to get rid of this. And then here we could say first. So let's say first can perform a select query. Okay, so let's start from reports, this table, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now we have something here. Okay, so we can no longer call this, right? So what we now need to do is to just say PDO query builder, okay? And that should be fine. So we don't have the table in the database. So let's run it and see what error we get. Okay. So we want to try to insert into this, but we don't have the data. So data is equal to an empty array. This test is still going to fail, but it doesn't matter for now because we have not really implemented the create method. Okay. So this is going to fail because we don't get back the ID. So it can perform raw query, and then we can just get all of the results. So let's say get, and then let's keep going. That's also going to fail because we don't have the table, and even if we have a table, we don't have data in the table. So test, it can perform select query. So this is okay. It's also going to fail. And then test, it can perform select query with multiple where clause. All right, so all the tests are going to fail, but this is okay. So let's run the test, and then we get 3 errors and 1 failure. Let's look at it. Failure asserting that null is not null, okay? It can perform query, call to a member function, get or none. Okay, base table or view not found. So this is really the error that I'm looking for, okay? We don't have this table. Okay, that's the foundation of all the problems that we have here. So we now need to actually create that table. So in the bug app testing, I'm going to create that table. And then I'm going to call this table reports. What are the main things that we really need here? So when someone reports or makes a report, to report a specific bug, what do we need? We want an auto increment feed for the ID. And then we want the report type. Okay, so report type, it should be a voucher. And then let's just make this 50. And then here we're going to have the message, or what's the message? We can call it message or call it content. So let's just leave it as a message. And then we could actually make this a test if we want to give opportunity for a really long message. So we have ID, the type of report, and then we have the message, And then we may also provide an option for link. So we could say link, and then we could make voucher, and then this should be 255. Then we can say email. This would be the reporter's email. So the email address of the person reporting this should be voucher 255. And then we need to add few columns. So let's just add 2 more, 2 or 1. So we probably need to know the time that it was created. Okay. So let's add 1 to it. So let's say created at. All right, so created at should be a date time or timestamp, and then we can actually save this. So now we have the report table. Okay, so if we execute again so this is bug app report. So we should really be running this in the test because I'm creating the table in which database bug app testing. Okay, so something's wrong there, obviously, because in the test environment it should be able to automatically select the database, which is this. Okay, so we are overriding this, but it doesn't get overridden. So what I will do is to see what is the value that we can really get from here. So let's just do a var dump on this. See what are we really getting from here, and then we can exit. So we get 2 different arrays, and the problem is because we're not merging the array. So we really need to say array merge. So we can just take this out and then say credentials, make things a bit cleaner. And just so you know, we're not going to be doing this way. We're going to change all of this as we move on in the course. But for now it's still okay. We need this to be able to do proper tests. So we can just say array merge. And then if we have var dump, credentials now should be good. We should now have the table replaced. So this is array 0. What went wrong? Credentials equals to array merge, not array key, array merge. Okay, so now it's replacing the DB. So we shouldn't have that problem anymore. So let's come here and then say credentials, and then we can remove this. And then we can make this look nice a bit. All right, so let's run the test again. And now we get here, fail asserting that null is not null, call to member function get or null. Yeah, this is pretty much okay because we don't have any data in the database. Okay, so we're now going to get back to the query builder class, implement the create method, and then we create, and then we can query. All right, so let's see how that's going to play out. We'll get back again to the test editor. And then we come to a query builder class. And then let's start with create. So to create, we need to take whatever the data that is being passed into this method called create. So that will be an array of key value pairs. We want to set the feeds. So we're going to say this feeds should be equal to, and here we're going to do a little bit of joining together. Okay, so I'm going to have a single quote here, and then I'm going to have backtick. Okay, so I'm going to have a single backtick here, then a dot to concatenate, and then say implode. So once we implode, what we want to use as the glue for implode, we're also going to start this with single quote, and then backtick, and then a comma and a space. So I'll show you the end result of this shortly so that you see what we are really doing here. And then we can say array keys data. So we grab all of the keys from the data. Those are going to be the feeds in the database. So when you want to create, you say, for example, report type, and then you specify the value, and then user email, you specify the value. So this is what we are essentially doing here. And then we're just going to close the last one. Okay, so this is a single one. And the reason why I'm putting the backtick here is because if we come back again to PHPMyAdmin, for example, if we want to write a query here, you can see the way that it's ticking the report. Okay, so if I come here and then select one of here, you can see that it uses backtick and backtick. So we can achieve something like this with the glue that I'm trying to create out of here. So this is what we essentially are trying to achieve. Okay, and then here what we want to do is say for each data as the column. So really data as the value, because we already have the columns which are already saved in the feeds. So we now need the values. So remember, here we get all the keys which will correspond to the feeds, which are the columns in the table. Right now we need the actual values. Okay, so these placeholders, this is just going to be equal to question mark, right? For each of them, we have a new question mark, which is a self placeholder. Okay, so that's the question mark. So for each element that we have inside of this array, we're going to have one placeholder, which represents one of the feeds. And then we're also going to say this bindings. And then it's also an array that should be equal to the value for each of the iteration. So the number of elements here should be equal to the number of elements here, and also should be equal to the number of elements here. And then here we're going to say query, or really this is the prepared statement actually. So we're going to say this prepare, this get query, and then the query that we want to get will be self DML insert. So this is an insert query that we want to get right now. And after we do that, we want to execute it. So we're going to say this statement is equal to this execute the query. Execute query. So at this stage, we've already inserted the data into the database. So we can now just say return this last inserted ID. Okay, so that's really what we need for the create method. So if we run our test again now, I think that the test should really pass. If it fails, maybe the assertion that we are asserting are not correct, but we shouldn't have much errors anymore. Okay, so implode, invalid argument passed. Okay, so this is true because if you go back to where we're calling that method, we're really not passing any value in our test. So let's come here. For our create method, we're not passing any value. So right here, we're going to populate this array. So let's say report underscore type. So this should correspond to the column name in the database. Okay, so take note of that. Report type should be a dummy value. We're going to change later. Type 1, let's say TYPE1, because we are also using this in our query somewhere. Okay, so let's say report type 1. Okay, report type 1. So it matches what we're expecting there. And then the next thing that we're going to need will be a message. And then in the table that we created, I think I did make some mistake. There are some optional values, like the link can be optional. This is a dummy message. This is a dummy message, but we'll fix all of that later. It's not really a big issue, but it's just a kind of mistake there. And then we have a few more things. So the email address. So let's just say support dev screencast. We can actually put any value right now, but I'm just going to continue. Let's look at it again. Table reports. What's the structure? We have link, email, created at. Okay, so let's just populate all of this. Link. And then this link should be like a link to like a snapshot or something. https ://link.com. And then the created that should just be a date. And we can actually just specify the date format as we've always done. So let's say y-m-d and then h column I column x. Okay, so these are the data that we want to pass in through to the create method, and then we want to get back an ID. Okay, so let's run that and see. Okay, so you see that the first test is passing. It can create records. Then if we look at our database, we really don't need to look at this. Once the test passes, we can be rest assured that the code works fine. So you can see the record here. But there are other test cases that are failing. It can perform raw query. Call to a member function get or none. Okay, because we have not implemented this method, I think. We've not implemented the raw method. So you can see the other ones pass, right? It can perform select query, passes. It can perform select query with multiple where clauses, also passes. So test that is failing is raw query, which we have not written. So let's go and write that. So come back again to query builder, then look for the method raw. Okay, so here what we want to do, pretty simple. As I said previously, we have pretty much all of the things that we want. So we're going to say query is going to be equal to query. That will be this, prepare, and then whatever query the user passed in. And then we can execute immediately. So by saying this statement is equal to this execute, and then pass the query, and then we can return this. So pretty much simple. So that's pretty much all we need to do for the raw query. So we can just take the opportunity to do these simple ones like find and also find one by. So these are basically going to be like shortcuts. So we can just say return for find. We can say return this where, and then we can say ID, because whenever we find, we always ensure that it's an ID. So that's equal to the ID that was passed in. Okay, and then probably we want to get the first one. So we can say, give us the first one. And then we want to do something similar for find one by, but this time we're going to use the feed and the value that was supplied by the user. And that's pretty much it. Okay. So we now have about 2 more methods that we need to implement: update and delete. So delete is pretty much simple. Let's run our test to ensure that our test is passing, and then we'll just implement the delete method. Okay, so now all our tests is passing.